Cursus monuments are a fascinating part of the Neolithic landscape in Britain and Ireland. These structures are made up of parallel lines of earthen banks with external ditches. Their widths vary between 20 and 80 metres, and their lengths vary between 100 metres and as much as 10 kilometres. They are usually enclosed at one or both terminal ends by an earthen bank, and gaps can often be identified which were probably for the entry into and exit from the monuments. Excavations over the years have not been able to determine their function, but they are thought to have been for some sort of communal ritual or event. In 2022, a team of researchers carried out a LiDAR survey at Baltinglass in Ireland and identified a cluster of 5 Cursus monuments. The results of this study have now been published in the journal Antiquity. Cursus monuments date to the Middle Neolithic, at a time when causewayed enclosures were no longer built or used. In fact, some Cursus monuments were constructed directly over the top of causewayed enclosures, such as those at Farnham All Saints in Suffolk and Eton in Yorkshire. They are often associated with other Neolithic monuments, forming sacred landscapes. Notable examples include Stonehenge, the Rudston Monolith, and Craborne Chase. It's difficult to show images of Cursus monuments because what remains tends to be a very subtle earthwork in the landscape or just crop marks. However, I find this website, stone-circles.org.uk, really useful for visualising these monuments because the owner of the site, Cursus, has mapped out the paths of some Cursuses that have been investigated over the years. He said I can use his images, and the link to his website is in the description below. Here are some pretty interesting examples. These are the 4 Cursus monuments that almost converge on the Rudston Monolith in Yorkshire. The Rudston Monolith is the tallest standing stone in Britain. It's not certain if the Cursus monuments were contemporary with the monolith, but either way, the landscape was pretty important to the ancients and was in use for a long time, as can be seen from the presence of a henge, a Neolithic barrow, and Bronze Age barrows. The Dorset Cursus is the longest to ever be found and stretches for over 10 kilometres. It's actually 2 Cursuses of roughly equal length that were constructed at different times and joined together. In Britain, Cursus monuments are often found in clusters, whereas in Ireland they are usually found by themselves or in pairs. It's also common for them to be associated with watercourses in Britain, but not in Ireland. Whereas the topography of the Cursus monuments in Britain is relatively flat, their locations in Ireland vary much more, and they can be found climbing some steep elevations. The discovery at Baltinglass is unusual in this respect because a cluster of 5 Cursus monuments has been identified, and several of these are close to rivers. It seems that Cursus monuments were often built in stages and modified repeatedly during the time they were in use. Construction may have taken place as a communal ritual, with short segments being created one after another. Out of the 25 Cursus monuments previously found in Ireland, the only one to have been properly excavated is at Newgrange in County Meath. The Newgrange Cursus sits 100 metres to the east of the famous passage tomb that dominates the sacred ancient landscape of the area. It measures 100 metres in length and 10 metres in width, and had a post-lined corridor in its centre which was aligned with sunrise on the spring equinox. Baltinglass in County Wicklow is known for its hilltop fortifications that mostly date to the Middle and Late Bronze Age. However, 3 of these have been given early Neolithic dates that were contemporary with funerary monuments in the area, including mounds, barrows, and cairns. The latest discovery there of the Cursus monuments shows that the Baltinglass landscape was very important to the Neolithic inhabitants of the area and continued to be important during the Bronze Age as well. In the summer of 2022, a LiDAR survey of Baltinglass was carried out by Bluesky Limited and funded by the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage Community Monuments. Data was collected at a resolution of 16 points per metre over 122 square kilometres. These data points were then put into a geographic information system to create visualisations that would help experts identify archaeological features. In addition to the Cursus monuments, the LiDAR survey doubled the number of known archaeological features in the area. These included a Bronze Age hill fort, prehistoric ring barrows, and early medieval ring forts. After the Cursus monuments had been identified by LiDAR, they were visited on the ground as well. The most well-preserved Cursus was found on Keedeen Mountain, where a robbed-out cairn sits on the summit and on the northeastern corner of the Cursus. Measuring 303 metres in length and between 32 and 43 metres in width, the Cursus rises 131 metres along its course. Its earthen banks vary in height and width along the length of the Cursus. There is an internal ditch and the remnants of an external ditch. Both ends have squared terminal banks. Due to the incline and the natural topography of the area, the cairn on the summit cannot be viewed from within the Cursus, and views to the north, east and south are limited. Only the Baltinglass landscape to the west has clear views. There are 6 breaks within the bank, and 2 of these also have breaks in the corresponding areas of the ditch. On the summer solstice, if a person is centrally positioned within the Cursus, they see the sun rising behind Keedeen Mountain and flooding the monument with light. A second Cursus measuring 113 metres in length and 24 metres in width was identified at Bolilug, 98 metres from a tributary of the Slaney River. It rises 13 metres from the west near the river to the east. The banks vary in width between 7.2 and 9.3 metres. Only the eastern terminal is enclosed with a rounded bank. From within the Cursus, the river and the causewayed enclosures of Rathcoran and Hughestown are visible. When standing at its eastern end, a large cairn and a possible early Neolithic enclosure on Kilnall Hill can be seen. On the autumn equinox, a person stood inside the Cursus can see the sun rising from a saddle in between 2 hillocks to the east. A third Cursus was identified at Shrewhound, close to both the River Slaney and Tuckmill Hill. A modern housing estate has cut off its western end, but the surviving part to the east still stretches for 131 metres with a width of 29.5 metres. Its parallel banks measure up to 7.3 metres in width, and a subcircular bank marks its eastern terminal. The Cursus rises 51 metres from east to west. There's some evidence that the Cursus originally measured 427 metres in length, crossed the River Slaney and terminated there with a subcircular bank. Tuckmill Hill is the site of several cairns and a causewayed enclosure. These cannot be seen from within the Cursus, but on the autumn equinox, the sun rises behind Tuckmill Hill and sheds light along the axis that the Cursus and the other features sit on. So it's possible that the Cursus was purposefully aligned with these other monuments. A fourth Cursus at Ballinacrow Lower follows a river terrace and measures 185 metres in length, rising along an elevation of 7.5 metres. The 2 banks are 54.5 metres apart and up to 5.5 metres in width, and it appears that the northern bank had an internal ditch. A subcircular terminal bank encloses one end of the Cursus. Towards the northeastern end of the Cursus, the Lincolnstown burials can be seen. The sun rises over the long axis of the Cursus on the summer solstice. Previously, another possible Cursus had been identified in the area at Hughestown, which abuts the southern side of the causewayed enclosure. This one measures 171 metres in length and 21.8 metres in width and rises over 40 metres. Its banks are 5.1 metres wide. The Cursus has a northeast-southwest axis but does not appear to have any solar alignments. Its northeastern end is enclosed by a squared terminal, but the southwestern end is open. The solstitial and equinoctial alignments do not come as a surprise because many Neolithic monuments in Ireland intentionally included solar orientations. Experts think this was to mark seasonal events in the agricultural calendar. At Baltinglass, 2 Cursus monuments are oriented towards sunrise on the summer solstice, and 2 are oriented towards sunrise on the autumn equinox. Taken as a whole, the author of the paper suggests these monuments were used by the Neolithic inhabitants of the area to mark the midpoint of the growing season and the beginning of the harvest season. However, such events in the annual farming calendar could have been marked in much more simple ways than these grand earthworks. The proximity of 3 of the Cursuses to funerary monuments suggests they may have been processional routes linked with these. The burial monuments do not come into view until the end of each cursus, but this may have been an intentional part of the design and connected to the funerary ritual in some way. I personally think that Cursus monuments were the part of important ceremonial landscapes, and that their modifications and additions over long periods of time were a result of the changing needs of the local community. Perhaps they played a multifunctional role that monitored the seasons, celebrated life events, and commemorated the ancestors. Of course, the very nature of these earthen structures means that many have been destroyed over the years by ploughing. It's difficult to know how many there were at any one time in the Neolithic, but just as with henges, stone circles, stone rows, and megalithic funerary monuments, the sheer effort and coordination it must have taken to build them shows that they played a significant role in the lives of Neolithic people. That's it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Let me know what you think about this subject in the comments. Thank you to my patrons and channel members for your support, and I'll see you next time.